think, with all the experience I'd had waiting for police, I'd be better at it. One would be mistaken. There were things that didn't improve with practice, finding bodies and waiting for homicide detectives being chief among them. I paced the length of the Dixon sunroom, glared at the owls, they glared back, and smiled at Marianne when she appeared with coffee. "Thank you." I accepted the mug. Of course, it was shaped like an owl, and took a small, grateful sip. The coffee was not good. It wasn't even mediocre. In fact, the coffee, if that's what it actually was, tasted like tiny bits of burnt dirt against my tongue, and my hostess needed an introduction to Mr. Coffee. I choked down a second sip. Mother would be pleased with my manners. Not that good manners mattered a whit to her now, not in the face of my finding yet another body. "Marianne, did you see anyone going in or out of my house this afternoon?" "No, I saw you leave around noon, I think it was." Her head settled into her shoulders like an owl's. "A few minutes later, when I looked out the window, there was a white Mercedes parked in the drive." Now I knew who'd been keeping tabs on me, Mother's source for all things Ellison. Marianne probably sat in this owl-infested room, watched everything that happened across the street, and reported it back to Mother. Maybe I wouldn't introduce her to Mr. Coffee after all. Marianne and the percolator from hell responsible for the cup of liquid masquerading as coffee could spend eternity together. Mr. Coffee and his magic would remain my secret. Marianne smoothed the plucked arch of her brow and donned a holier-than-thou expression. "I remember thinking it was odd because I knew you'd gone. I figured he was waiting for you to come home." "Who?" Or, given Marianne's macrame friends, "Who?" "Hunter Taft." My stomach plunged to my feet. My heart rose to my throat. Marianne was wrong. She had to be wrong. Of course she was wrong. "You saw Hunter Taft across the street?" Aggie's voice was as sharp as a carving knife. "His car was there?" The holiest among holies expression remained fixed on Marianne's face. She was not gossiping. She was merely sharing information. Aggie was as protective of Hunter as a mother bear of her cubs. Hunter had helped Aggie's late husband through his final illness. "There are lots of white Mercedes." My thought exactly. "But only one that's regularly parked in Ellison's drive." Marianne's tone suggested she didn't appreciate arguments from a housekeeper. "Did you actually see Hunter?" I put a conciliatory note in my voice. "No." The word was grudging, a reluctant admission. Marianne crossed her arms, a study in obstinacy. "But I recognized the car. I'm sure it was his. He had to be there." She spoke with absolute assurance. I sank onto the chaise lounge and let my head settle into the cradle of my hands. There was a dead woman in my study, God rest her soul, and that was not the worst part of this day. Marianne Dixon was about to implicate Hunter in a murder based on the color of his car. Detective Anarchy Jones had demonstrated his willingness to throw Hunter Taft in a suspect pool. Now he had a reason, a good one. I knew, with the same certainty that I knew macrame owls would never perch on my walls, that Hunter hadn't killed his ex-wife. Why would he? She'd remarried. He didn't even have to pay alimony. I lifted my head. "Aggie, what time did you call me?" "Around noon." I glanced at my watch. The dial read just shy of 1. "If I left the house around 12:05, and we got back at 12:25, that means Khaki was killed in those 20 minutes. "Yes," Aggie nodded. Marianne stared, all eyes, like an owl. I took another sip of god-awful coffee, suppressed a shudder, and put the cup down on a side table. "We just got off the phone with Hunter." "We?" "Huh." Aggie had spoken with Hunter. "I don't see how he could be here between 12:05 and 12:25, then in his office when I called." "Probably not." Why weren't the worry lines disappearing from Aggie's forehead? "Also, it sounded as if he was in an important meeting." Aggie shook her head. "That's doubtful. If he's working at his desk, he doesn't like being disturbed. Chances are good he was eating a tuna fish sandwich and reading a brief." "But the receptionist handed him a note." "She did."